Hey everybody, welcome to Lady Overlander Radio. Tonight we're speaking with Patty Upton of Outback of Beyond. Stay tuned. Grab your favorite drink, whether it's a coffee, cocktail, or tea, and get ready. It's Ladies Night on Lady Overlander Radio. The Lady Overlander Radio podcast is sponsored by Frontrunner Outfitters, Midland Radio, Go Treads, Sport Keg, CB Adventure Supply, Adventure Trail Outfitters, Overland Spices, and the More Expo. Hey Arla, hey girl, hey.
Hey girl, hey. What's happening?
Not much. So we have something that we're kind of switching up this week. Where are you going tomorrow?
I am going to Rendezvous in the Ozarks, also known as Rito, with Natural State Overland.
And I am not, unfortunately.
We can't get our gags together.
No. She's at one show.
We did go to Big Iron together, though. We were there together. We did it.
Yeah. We did Expo West and Big Iron together this year, and we're going to try to figure it out next year and do
We'll try.
More shows, or less shows and more shows together, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All those things.
But Arla will be at Rendezvous in the Ozarks, so definitely go by and see her. She'll have some goodies to give away, and she'll be hanging out near Professor Bats and Friends. And do they have all the podcasters kind of in the same area? Are they going to have Budget Overland there too, or how are they doing that?
It's just Professor Bats and Friends, as far as I know.
Okay. Yeah, I know Budget Overland's going to be there as well, and I'm not sure who else, but
I think Benji's just camping and trail riding and stuff. I don't think he has like a booth or anything like that. I could be wrong. He'll correct me, I'm sure, when I see him if I'm wrong. Quite possibly. It looks like Misty froze up because I just realized that she's not moving.
I did. Yeah, I think it's Miss Starlink. I think it's a little early tonight.
What is happening?
Sorry. Yeah. But
what is happening?
Can you see me? Am I moving? Am I talking?
Can you hear me now? Yes, we hear you. We see you. We hear you. All the things. Oh my God, you froze up again.
My goodness.
Lord have mercy. Misty?
I'm here. I promise. I'm here intermittently. I think the kids used all the priority bandwidth on Starlink. Dang it. Anyway. So we are here tonight to talk to Patty Upton. And she is, if you guys haven't heard of her, she is an international overlander. She's an amazing life story. She's been all over God's green earth, everywhere. Like there's just so many places I can't even list them all.
When we grow up, we want to be like her.
Yeah, one day when I grow up, I'm going to be just like Patty. So, Patty, we're going to go ahead and give you a chance to introduce yourself and give a little background on yourself, and we can add on and add additional questions to that. So,
okay. Well, thank you for having me here. I'm enjoying this so much. I hadn't met Arla before other than listening to you on your podcast, but Misty, I've had the privilege of meeting in person, and it was a true joy. Little bit about me. I'm a traveler. I've been a traveler since before I was born. Mom was pregnant with me when we took our first airplane trip to New Jersey, where I could be born. And I feel that's probably why I just have itchy feet and can't sit still. I've always wanted to travel, always read about traveling. There was a set of books I remember as a kid in our house called Lands and People. And it was like 8 or 10 different books, almost like an encyclopedia, but it was just on customs, maps, people. And I would get lost in those things. I loved it. And my dad was military, so we did travel some overseas. We lived in Okinawa for 4 years, then back in the States, lived on the East Coast of the States quite a bit. And then he retired from the military. We ended up in Panama, where he worked for the Marine Corps, or worked for the military. He had been active duty Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And I got off the plane there and I said, oh, this is eternal summer. I'm home. This is where I want to be. You put your Christmas decorations or outside lights up once and you forget about them because they're on your patio, and you just live outdoors from then on for the rest of the year. And I just enjoy that type of weather. I don't know if I could do the humidity now, but I certainly do appreciate the heat. So I lived down there for 17 years. I worked for the Girl Scout. Well, I am a lifetime member Girl Scout. I've been a Girl Scout since I was 7 years old. So again, that falls right into my background of being outdoors. I liked that portion of it. I liked being challenged with the merit badges we had, proficiency badges, I think is what they're called in Girl Scouts. Merit badges is Boy Scouts or vice versa. I never, because I was a Boy Scout too. So I worked with Explorer Scouts for a number of years. But my first husband, who I met in Panama, he and I worked with an Explorer post down there, whose main objective or focus was jungle survival. And we were sponsored by the Air Force Jungle Survival School. So we did jungle survival with these kids, took them out on survival campouts for 3 and 4 days where they had to hunt and get their own food, make their own shelters, that sort of thing. So, I mean, it's just kind of, I think, part of my lifestyle is doing that sort of thing, possibly a little bit out of the ordinary, but, it was still what I enjoyed doing. And then I worked for the Girl Scouts down there for many years, started off as just a receptionist, but worked up to office manager, camp director, day camp director, established camp director, field director, you name it. It was one of those things that depending on the day of the week as to what I was doing. If it was summer, I was directing camp. It was winter, we were doing other things. So I met Loren Upton, my husband down there. He was traveling through originally in 1975, driving a Ford F-250 pickup, and bright red, big, huge bumper, massive winch. And he was headed for the Darien Gap and further. And my ex-husband's the one that introduced us. He brought Loren home and said, look what I found. This guy thinks he's going to go through the Darien Gap. And we said, well, okay, fine. What can we do to help you? So again, with our contacts with jungle survival and that area, we got him more information, some maps, but nothing that was accurate, medical supplies, some equipment, that sort of thing. He didn't make it. That trip ended with a man being shot and killed, and that put an end to that trip. So it was, my life goes on from there. That was just the beginning when I met him, when I met Loren. And I knew I wanted to do something like that, but I was recently married. I, had a job. I was happy where I was. I was probably the right age, but my mind just wasn't in that particular phase. And it wasn't until years later when Loren came through on his 4th attempt to go through the Darien Gap that I was finally both at a right point in my life, mentally and age-wise. Well, maybe a little too old, but who knows? You're never too old to do this. So I went with him from that point on in 84 when he came down. We started the trip in 85 to go through the Darien Gap, dry season of 85. And that was the trip that was successful. It got us a Guinness Book of Record for the first all-land crossing of the Darien Gap by vehicle. There's been lots of vehicle expeditions through there. And I say lots, I'm talking handful. But they've all traveled a good distance by river because that's the easier way to go. I mean, it's not like there's highways and roads down there. There aren't. You ask a native how to get from Pinogana to Basal, they're going to say, well, you get on the river and you go up the Tweeder River and you get to Basal. We said, no, we want to remain on land. That was a little more difficult. So that's what we did. We remained on land. We crossed rivers. We did 125 miles in 741 days, from the end of the road in Panama to the beginning of a road in Colombia. And that's what got us in the Guinness Book of Record, was that.
Wow.
Amazing.
And he was very persistent, huh? He tried 4 different times.
He did. One thing that Loren was known for was when he said he was going to do something, he was going to do something. So you never piss this man off. He was the type of person that, first of all, he was from the old school. He was very much a gentleman. He was very much, what his word was his bond. When he said that that's what he was going to do, and his goal was to take one American-made vehicle around the world on a north-south course, all on land except for the South Atlantic. You look at a map or a globe, there's a land route from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska to the tip of South America, and a land route from the southern tip of Africa to the northern tip of Norway. The problem is there's a road through Africa, even though it's rather questionable at times, but there is a road the entire distance between Africa to Norway. However, the other side of the world, Alaska to South America, the Darien Gap is there, and that is a roadless section of jungle. It depends on who you ask. We did it 125 miles because we had wheels on the ground. You talk to or read other articles, they did it in 80 miles. Well, if you go by river a lot, yeah, it probably is maybe 80 miles. I don't know. I just know that what we did was 125 miles. But this is what he said he was going to do, and this is what his ultimate goal was, and his ultimate goal was finally realized.
Yeah, that's an impressive feat all in and of itself. I mean, that's just.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you convince you to go with him? Like, how'd that?
Well, again, it's in my DNA. I think that's there. That's just a given. But I knew when he was down there in '84 and I was helping him organize and write letters and make phone calls and set up stuff, because he had a problem on his '79 trip in the Darien Gap, in the Colombian portion of the Darien Gap, where the Colombians had created a new national park, and they basically wanted a payoff. It wasn't that they weren't going to allow them to go through. The park officials gave them permission to go through the park headquarters. But there was one little, pardon the expression, nitwit park ranger out there that wanted a payoff. And that was after he told Loren that he had to go to Bogota and get permission, which Loren did. So Loren shows up with permission, and now the little park ranger doesn't want to see it. And Loren made the big mistake of saying, again, he'll say things sometimes without thinking, it's going to take more than you and your gun to stop me. So the park official said, yep. Came back a couple of days later with more men and more guns. And Loren saw the point of view and left that Jeep to the jungle, and he and his team got out. So when he says he's going to do it, he's going to do it. He came back in '84, and I was doing a lot of phone calls and writing to see if we could get permission to go through this park in Colombia, of which we were actually denied.
Wow.
And I knew that I wanted to go, but I also knew that I couldn't say, hey, I'd like to go, and then not have my butt in that seat when the Jeep left. I had to make sure that everything was organized in my life for 30 days, because we thought it was going to take 30 days. We didn't realize it was going to take as long as it did. So I said I had my job covered. I took the bookkeeper. I says, look, can you work full time for 30 days? I'll take leave without pay for 30 days. That pay will go towards you. January or February, early March for the Girl Scout office was pretty laid back. There was no camps going on. It was pretty easy to be able to be away from the office. Made sure I had no doctor's appointments. My daughter was well taken care of. Everything was organized. So then once I knew I could do all that and everything was organized, then I said to Loren, I want to go. And then it was going to take, something drastic for me not to be in the seat, because I knew I would lose a lot of respect from him if I all of a sudden, I changed my mind, or, oh, I forgot I can't go because I got this coming up. So I knew I had to make sure I was going to be there. And I was. And it was a 30-day trip that we thought was going to be, or 30 days we thought we were going to be through it in 30 days. Little did we know we did 37 miles in 30 days. And
wow.
And we were nowhere near the national park at that point. We were still in Panama. We hadn't even gotten to the last village in Panama yet, but still, I think 11 miles from the border of Colombia. So it was, Loren stayed with the Jeep in the village of Pucarú for that 9 months of the rainy season, because down there, rainy season just puts a halt to everything on land. If you're going to go by river, it wouldn't be so bad, but because the rivers are now running full, but we weren't. In fact, we wanted it as dry as possible. So I went back to my job in Panama, and Loren stayed with the Jeep and lived near the village of Pucaroo, and I would send supplies down via the missionary pilot that would go in maybe about every 6 weeks. I'd scour the secondhand store for magazines and books and newspapers, whatever, just something for him to read. And then cases of canned food, that sort of thing. And I made a deal with the missionary pilot where he wouldn't charge me anything if I was sending down supplies for the villagers as well. So I would get Tupperware containers, plastic containers, scrap material because they sewed quite a bit, jeans, T-shirts, things like that from the secondhand store. And I'd make up care packages and I'd send those down with the missionary pilot as well for the villagers. And that's where Loren lived for 9 months, was, as he said, watching the rains fall and the bananas grow.
Wow.
Amazing.
So when did you realize you had a little bit of feelings for him, or vice versa?
Oh,
How did that all happen?
That was well into, trying to think, second dry season in, maybe a little bit during the second dry season in there, which would have been the dry season of 86, January, February, March of 86. And at that point, I knew I wanted to go longer. I don't know that there were that strong of feelings. I just knew I wanted to be a part of this trip at this point. I wanted to be there. And we had to call a halt to the trip in 86. We had to leave the Jeep with there was a little farm. Well, if we want to back up, we'll talk about that national park that we had no permission to go through. Once we got to the border, we knew that we would set foot in. I mean, there's nothing there saying national park. It's supposed to be there. We didn't know where the boundaries were. We knew where the boundaries were more or less in 79, but where they were at that particular point, we didn't. So when we got to the border, we turned in a direction that no other vehicle expedition has ever done. We turned almost southward. I got to think of a map. I believe it would have been southward towards the Pacific, following the border of Panama. Mm-hmm. And still going downhill, because there's a mountain range there that separates mountain range. We're talking a few hundred feet, not real mountains, but a mountain range that separates Colombia and Panama. And we were paralleling the border to a degree, going in a southerly direction, and as well as going kind of trying to stay in the downhill so that we'd get into lower. So we weren't going up and down so much that we could continually be going down. And we just plowed our way through, making our way by our guide, finding our route for us. And in this was second dry season, 86, we knew we were out of the national park only because there were now farms, little tiny ranches and farms, so subsistence farming type stuff. Right. So we knew that, or at least we assumed we were out of the national park at that point. Plus there were fewer big trees. There was more land that had been cleared. And we had both axles were broken at this point. We were strictly in front wheel drive and winching when we limped into this little tiny, it wasn't a village, it was a house, little wooden hut, thatched roof. And Loren and I were actually still sitting in the Jeep, and Loren was in the driver's side, I was in the passenger side, and two men walked up, well-dressed for out there, probably like a polo shirt, nice slacks, not hiking boots. Where they'd come from or anything, I don't know. They just kind of all of a sudden showed up. And Cookie, our cook at this time, he was with us for the second dry season in there. And he was without a doubt the most fantastic man you ever want to have working for you. Anyway, he speaks no English. We don't really speak good Spanish. And these two gentlemen came up and started conversing with Loren. And they introduced themselves as men from the national park. And they wanted to know what our route was through the park. Well, first of all, we don't know. I mean, follow the trail that's back there. That's where our route was, because we don't know. We don't have a map. We've got no clue. And they started in again, and it sounded like they were getting a little agitated. And I don't know what Cookie said. Cookie was standing behind these two men who were standing right in front of the driver's door. Door was open where Loren was sitting. And they were talking to us, and Cookie just all of a sudden piped up. And I have no idea to this day what he said, but he went on and on for a good minute or two. And then they turned back and looked at us, because they turned around and looked at Cookie. Then they turned back and looked at us, and they said, "Okay, muy bueno, have a good day." And Cookie does this. I have no idea what he said, not a clue. But it was fabulous, whatever it was. Everybody was happy and they walked off. We still had broken axles, but that was the next problem. And we contracted with this farmer for 50 cents a day to watch the Jeep while we would take the whole axle housing out with us to try and get it replaced or repaired.
Wow.
We knew that we knew we weren't going to be able to get it replaced or repaired in Colombia. So we ended up, Loren had good friends in Medellin. So we ended up in Medellin, left the axle housing with them. And he went back to the States, back to try and get a job. I went back to Panama to my job because I still had a job there. And when I got back, within about 6 weeks of me getting back, I was informed by the board of directors that because of the Panama Canal Treaty, Torrijos-Carter Treaty back in 69 or 68, whenever it was, 69, I guess, 70. I never remember. Long time ago. They were going to go to an all-volunteer office staff for the Girl Scouts, and they were going to move the office to Fort Clayton. And they were going to have just volunteer Girl Scout leaders come in and man the office. And they wanted me to train these leaders as to what we did and how we did it and all that. I said, okay, fine. But if I'm out of a job, that meant I was out of housing. I was out of pay. I wasn't going to volunteer. I couldn't do this job for nothing. I had to be paid. I had to have a house to stay in. I had to have money. I just couldn't subsist without that. So I said, well, this is probably writing on the wall. I'm going full time. So once everything was situated, they never did send anybody in. I mean, I don't know if you've ever worked with volunteers, but the volunteers are all gung-ho until they have to actually show up and do something sometimes. So yeah, I had all these people scheduled to learn how to work the office, and no one came. So the day I had to close the office, I took the keys up to the gal that was my contact on the board of directors. I said, Pat, here's the keys to the office. Nobody ever showed up to work in the past 3 weeks. I don't know what you're going to do. I really apologize, but you guys are, on your own at this point. And I was on a plane headed to Seattle to spend the summer with my mom. And I had told Loren that, I wanted to join full time. So eventually I met him in California, and we drove across country to Florida. I flew out to Panama. He flew out to Colombia. He had the axle shafts. I had a few other small miscellaneous spare parts that I could get in my luggage and get in through Panama Customs, new gear shift and a new drive line and a few other little things. And then I hiked through and went by boat from Yavisa all the way to where the Jeep was that season, which it sounds like it's a long distance, but I mean, first of all, we did a good portion of it by boat. So walking distance wasn't much. And besides, the Jeep was doing like half a mile to a mile a day at the most, if we were lucky. So walking through I think it was 4 days walking from the time I left, I want to say Pucaroo. I don't think we went by boat to Paya. I think we went just by boat to Pucaroo, and we walked from Pucaroo, which was 17 miles, and then to the Jeep, probably another, so maybe it's a total of 40 miles, 4 days. That's about right. Yeah. And
that's 4 days more walking than Arla and I want to do. So yeah,
100%. I'm out.
Well, I gotta say, I am not a backpacker. I carried a day pack. I hired natives to carry everything else, including cook for us, because I had to have natives to carry this stuff. So now all of us, your supply thing gets really complicated. You can, have more men working for you, and then you got to carry more food. So you have to kind of weigh out, okay, how many men to carry the food to feed these people that are going. So yeah, I hired men to carry the supplies and cook and feed everybody. So that was, in fact, one of them was Cookie. I mean, Cookie, I wasn't going anywhere without Cookie. Cookie was going to be with us. And then I just left my stuff at the Jeep, went into Colombia, further into Colombia, and met Loren in I think I met him in Turbo, where he came out with the repaired axle housing with the new shafts in it and everything. And we then had to go back out by boat to where we could get another boat to go further upriver, to hire mules, to make a Travis pole like the Indians of the plains used to use to carry things, to put the axle housing on, to drag the whole axle housing into where the Jeep was.
That's a lot of logistics, Patty.
Yeah.
The logistics are by far the most difficult part. The actual doing of the trip was easy. It was the planning of, breakdowns, men, food, we're out of gas, we're out of rice, we're out of sugar. Men got to have their sugar. So, it was one of those things that they were by far more complicated and trying to deal with than the actual moving of the Jeep through the jungle.
The other Jeep that Loren had to leave behind, did you guys ever recover that or find that other Jeep, or whatever happened to that one?
Well, I have a photo of it, or at least I shouldn't say of it, of the hood of it over a dugout canoe that a Norwegian, Helge Pedersen, he was a motorcyclist that went through in 86, I believe. He went from south to north, so from Colombia to Panama. And he went through this village, and the hood of the Jeep was over this dugout in the middle of the village. So he took a picture of it, not knowing too much about it. Wow. And then I later met him in Seattle. I went to a slide presentation of his, and he didn't know I was there. A mutual friend brought me and introduced me to Helga afterwards. He says, oh my God, that's great. I've got a photo I've got to give you. So he made sure I got a couple of photos of the hood of the Jeep. After that, I heard, but I don't think it's true, that it was in the police station on the wall of this village, which I don't think it was. That was just somebody else's comment. I think that was just a lot of smoke. I'm sure it's turned upside down and made a big walk out of or something by now. I don't know, because what are you going to do? Maybe they've taken the motor out and made got some type of a generator in the battery, and they can make some electricity or something. But other than that, I don't know. There's nowhere to drive it. They're not taking it for a joyride. So
right.
Took the seats out and have it in somebody else's house. I don't know. Somebody has 2 Jeep seats in it. You have no idea.
I was curious if the forest kind of took it under it,
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, the hood's the only thing I have seen, and we did not go in the direction that he had gone at that time because we knew that was problematic. So we went off in another direction when we came through in 86 with the Sandship Discovery.
Wow. I got a picture here I want to ask you about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pop it up on the screen here.
Africa, Zaire,
main
bridge. Yeah.
Okay. That looks like a really sturdy, well-made.
Well, that's why I walked. That's why I'm taking the picture.
Absolutely. Well, I would absolutely walk. Yes. At that point, I will walk. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of several. That was not just one. There were a lot of bridges in Zaire that were like that. There's actually concrete pillars underneath that had been, that probably had a paved bridge over it at one point in time, but lack of road work and maintenance, and things do go to pot literally, and eventually they just threw logs across it, and that's how you cross the rivers.
Wow. So how much actual driving did you guys get to do? You did a lot of winching, you did a lot of river crossing and walking and boating, and it was 56,000 miles from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska to Gamvik, Norway.
Wow.
And that was, if you look at looking at a globe, that's about 3,000 miles directly across the North Pole from each other. And at the time we were headed north through Norway, we didn't know where the furthest road north was. We just, it was kind of like we're following our nose, we're going north, that's all we know. And we would stop at various towns and ask, what town is further north than you? What town is further north than you? And we'd stop at the police stations or whatever and ask. And finally, this last one said, well, the town of Gamvik's as far north as you can drive. We said, that's where we're going. And that's where we ended up.
That's crazy. It's crazy that you guys did that with very rarely ever, if ever, using a map as well.
Now, we had maps. They were rather the Darien Gap, the maps there were non-existent. We had maps that we got from the military, and there were just white blank spots where there should have been terrain markings or something, because they had no idea what was there. And it basically was, I just found there in pencil or something, there'd be dragons there, because nobody knew. I mean, it was just this white blank spot on a map. Through most of South America, we had good maps. Africa, we had to buy the most recent map we could find before we left South Africa, so that we knew what roads no longer existed. Not necessarily what roads were built, but what roads no longer existed, because every year in Zaire, more and more roads were claimed by the jungle and no longer passable. And even when we were there, we had to change our route and go into Rwanda for probably a good full day. We drove over into Rwanda because this one section that we were planning to go on, we had talked to other overlanders coming south. They said no. They said, don't take that at all. It's horrible. That's one nice thing about, first of all, being an overlander, you can spot an overlander. And going through Africa, they were all European, and usually Land Rovers, sometimes Toyotas. Toyotas or Land Rovers were the vehicles of choice. And you'd always stop. You were stopping them and they were stopping you if you were, head on to each other, because they wanted to know what was in front of them, and we wanted to know what was in front of us, and where did you guys spend the night, and where did you find gas, and what was this town like, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely
there was
best to ask people.
It was sort of like, it was Google on wheels, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. So tell me about what's going on in this picture. This is my favorite picture so far here.
Oh.
There's a lot going on in that picture, Patty. So
yeah, there is. People always want to know about life-threatening situations. Well, yeah, there were a few. This was probably the only one that I would consider a life-threatening situation. Other than on the Autobahn in Germany in a Jeep doing 40 when everyone else is doing 120. That one was, yeah.
That's a little spooky.
Yeah, it was. But this one, the picture you showed was, that's the Nile River. It was northern Sudan. It was late June 1988. And we had been following the Nile River north out of Khartoum, headed to Wadi Halfa and eventually into Egypt. Well, not Wadi Halfa. Wadi Halfa was on the east bank of the Nile. We wouldn't have gone there. We were staying strictly on the west bank of the Nile River.
Okay.
And the Nile was our direction of travel and our source of water. As I said, this was late June, so it was definitely a little warm. And a big rocky outcropping had come right down to the river's edge, and we couldn't. I got to get rid of my dog. Okay, that's it. We couldn't go between the river and this rocky outcropping. So Loren took a big swing to the west, further west, to get around this rocky patch. And we got into some soft sand and we broke an axle shaft. And that was we'd already used our spare shaft by that time. And we were in front wheel drive, and there wasn't too much, if anything, to winch to, if I remember correctly. And we made it up to some nearby brush. And that night was without a doubt the spookiest night of the entire trip, because I knew we were down. We were down and down hard. Yeah. Probably one of the first times I probably actually really broke down and cried from fear. I may have been frustrated before, or pissed off at Loren before, whatever, but this was absolute fear. And Loren, in a way to calm me down, he said, I want you to sit down and I want you to take your journal and write down everything you think we need to take with us when we get out of here. Because we're going to have to get out of here somehow. We don't know how yet, but what do we need to take with us? I'll do the same thing, and then don't talk to me, I won't talk to you, and we'll compare notes afterwards. So, I mean, I know in hindsight, he was trying to get me focused on positive things instead of negative things, plus do something worthwhile.
Right.
And it worked. And we sat down and we compared our notes. And the only thing that I can remember that his list had that I didn't have was the inside rear view mirror to use as a signaling device.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, they were all pretty much the same. The next morning, he took a hike up to this rocky outcropping, and he could see the Nile was probably about a mile from where we were camped. So that was a big relief. We knew we had a water supply at that point. And then he was able to hike down to the river and found out that the river had a current. We didn't know if we were far enough north to be on Lake Nasser, in which case there would be virtually no current at all.
Okay.
So we had a current, we had a broken Jeep, we had water. We secured the Jeep the best we could. And then there's 2 tin boxes. That's one of them that you see floating in the water. That's in the back of the Jeep. Well, you can almost see it underneath the big green duffel. We sealed the seams, made them watertight. It was probably 11 inches by 17 inches by 33 inches long. He took tamarisk branches and made stabilizers for it. And then we put all the gas that was in our plastic jerry cans into the tanks of the Jeep. And we turned the jerry cans upside down, tied them onto the frame, and the SS survival ship Nile Queen was born.
Oh my gosh.
And we held on to the survival ship, the raft, or you can see there's a rope tied to it that has an inner tube that we've inflated, a spare tire tube that we inflated, and it's there in the way up there by the purple ticker tape. And we held on to either the raft or the tire, and we pushed out and got out in the current as best we could. And for 2.5 days, we floated down the Nile River until we found some form of civilization, which eventually got us to Wadi Halfa, where we were able to then get a train from there 600 miles across the desert, Khartoum, where we could order spare parts from the States. And due to another whole series of misfortunes, Loren decided that he wasn't going to leave the sand ship Discovery out there in the desert by herself. And it had come too far and meant too much to leave her to the whims of whatever. So he took 6 weeks' supply of food, went back by train to Wadi Halfa, and arranged with the natives there that lived in the village to take him upriver to where the Jeep was. And I stayed in Khartoum waiting for the parts to arrive. And I had the parts in my hand 10 or 11 days after my mother mailed them. But at the same time, both the Blue and the White Nile went into flood. There was heavy rains in Ethiopia, heavy rains in the south of Sudan. And the rains had washed the railroad tracks out going north to Wadi Halfa. I was stuck in the city. He was stuck at Camp Broken Axle. And I had no way of getting a message to him saying, I've got the parts, but there's been a problem. He had no way of getting a message to me asking him what the problem was or anything. So it was rather frustrating. And I knocked on doors. I talked to businessmen. I did everything but stop camel herders in the street asking if they were headed north. And finally, through the United Nations Development Program, they had a C-130 Hercules that was loaned to them by the Belgium Air Force that was flying up to Wadi Halfa with relief supplies for the villagers the next day. They said, be on the corner at 7 o'clock. I was on the corner at 6 o'clock and was flown to Wadi Halfa the next day. And it was a total of probably 15 minutes to repair the broken axle, because Loren had gone to free-floating axles after our problems in the Darien. I'm sure you're familiar. You undo 6 bolts, pull out the axle, put in the 6, put the cap back on the 6 bolts. You don't jack it up. You don't take a tire off. You don't do anything. You don't even get your hands dirty. I mean, it's nothing. 15 minutes, you're done. That delay was 70 days from the time we broke down to the time we were moving again. Wow. And it was 4.5 hours and 36 miles after we left that camp. We were on a tarred road in Egypt, and we knew from then on we'd have tarred roads underneath us. It was a good feeling.
Unbelievable.
We had done 4,500 miles of 4-wheel drive in Africa.
All right, wow. I got a question. Whenever, I've never heard that. This is crazy. Whenever you're floating down the Nile for 2.5 days, were you not? I mean, that's terrifying to me.
No, you don't think of those things. See,
how do you not think of those things? And what's in the water with you? You know what I mean?
There were a few occasions that the ground in the water was really mud. I mean, really thick mud, to the point where you might have 6 to 8 inches of water, but when you'd step down, you'd go in 10 inches of mud. So you'd be up to your knees, but only 6 inches or 8 inches of water. really soft, silty, gooey mud. So you didn't want to do that if you could avoid it. I mean, as soon as you got in the water, you wanted to lay out and float and get out into where there was deeper water, where you weren't touching what was ever on the bottom. And there were a couple of times the current had shifted, or the river was really wide, or when we were trying to make our way to the riverbank, where you had to walk through that stuff. And I remember we were walking along the riverbank at one point. I was holding onto the raft. Loren was behind the raft with the inner tube. And I stepped on something in the mud, and it kind of slithered away. And I thought, oh, please let that be.
Oh, no.
I turned around where his foot was, and he was, 10 feet behind me. And I thought, nope, that wasn't him. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't him. And then when we got to Wadi Halfa, we had the really wonderful pleasure of staying at what they call the Crocodile Hotel. Yes, the Nile crocodile is called that because it lives in the Nile River. Fortunately, they tend to hang out where there's people, rubbish, garbage being thrown in the river, because that's what they do, that sort of thing. Or where there's a lot more wildlife coming down to the river. Where we were, there was nothing. So there were no crocodiles out where we were.
That's a good thing.
No, ma'am. Mm-mm.
No. Someone to slither on my foot. You would have seen me walk on water.
I got to say that I found out what water will do to your skin. You know how they say, if you get your hands too wet, it takes all the oil out. Try that for 2.5 days. Your entire body it feels so dry. If you felt like if you moved, everything was going to crack. The skin was just going to split open. It was white. I mean, it was literally just white, almost like powder white, like you've been dusted with flour. There was no oil left in my skin at all. Okay.
So was this day 1 or day 2? Because you're smiling in this picture.
Yeah, okay. That's day 1. Yeah, that was the launching of the survival ship Nile Queen. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I see your smile there, so that's good.
That's about all you can see in that picture.
It's a little older of a picture, but yeah, I love it. So 70 days and all of that you went through, and then what happened after that? You guys continued on out of Egypt, or?
Yeah, we were actually under house arrest. When we got to Egypt, well, you're driving through the desert. If you've ever driven across plain, ordinary, everyday desert with virtually no relief, no mountains, no rocks, no vegetation, it's just a plain. It's nothing out there. And there's this big black thing in front of us that's, low to the ground, but it's going from east to west. And we're looking at this thing and driving. And Loren said, what is that, railroad tracks? And I'm, of course, looking at the map. I said, no, there's no railroad tracks listed on the map. Said, maybe it's a pipeline. No, there's no pipeline listed on the map. What would that be? We were literally probably 20 yards from it when we realized what it was. It was a tarred road that was probably above the surface of not above on the surface of the desert, but probably 12 inches high. We had trouble getting up on it because it was so high. We had to make a way up there. And it was going east to west. And that's what confused us because we knew that all the civilization that we were looking for in Egypt was north. We thought, well, do we go east or do we go west? And we thought, well, we're going to go to the east because the river's in that direction. So if there's any civilization, it's going to be to the east. So we took off to the east and came across a military guard post. And they had no idea what to do with us. We had permission to do this from the government, from a contact we had in the Egyptian government in Sudan. But that still doesn't mean it's okay, because they had no idea what to do. They didn't have any way of stamping us into the country. They said, okay, we're going to put a guard with you all the way to Aswan. We said, okay, fine. So there's 3 of us crammed in the front of the Jeep, all the way to Aswan, including a rifle, all the way to Aswan. And we're taken to the security police headquarters, which is a small little building, and the police chief lived in the back of it. And he said it was too late to do anything that day. We'd have to talk to them in the morning. They said, okay, well, where can we camp? Because that's what we do, is we camp. He said, well, you can't go anywhere. You have to stay here because you're under arrest until we get this cleared up. We said, okay, fine. Where can we camp? We still have to camp somewhere. He said, we can camp on the front porch. So we slept on the security police headquarters front porch that night. And then the next day, everything was, we talked to him. I know, he still hadn't made up his mind of what was going to happen with us. There was still some question of what we were going to do. Could he do it? And we said, well, we want to visit the temple, Abu Simbel. And they said, well, no, you can't. You have to go to, maybe this wasn't in Aswan yet. No, this was at Abu Simbel. This was at the little town right where Abu Simbel is located. And we said, we wanted to visit the temple. And he says, well, you can't. You have to get permission from Aswan to visit the temple. We said, we're here. We're not going to come back. Let us visit the temple. He said, okay, you can visit the temple, but the guard's going to be waiting for you at the gate when you come back out. Sure enough, there was our little guard waiting for us. He says, okay. Then we came back. He finally gave us paperwork to get to Aswan. When we got to Aswan, we had to go through another whole thing with the security police there. And we were finally checked into the country in Aswan. That's what it was.
Golly.
Wow.
But having come across an area that no one else had done that, or at least very few, they weren't sure what to do with us.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Wow. I don't know how. Like, did you guys ever have like a trip that was just super smooth and had no issues? And like, oh wow.
In the Jeep, no. Everything was normal. Nothing went as planned. It was always, something went, askew somewhere. But to me, that was part of the trip that made the trip memorable. That's what we filled our journal pages with. Hopefully that's what the story will be about, is all these other little if, ands, and buts and everything that happened. But there were definitely, there were so many memorable times. I can remember one time in the Daring Gap in Panama, there's different tribes that live down there. This was a tribe of Choco, very friendly people, very, 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 very friendly people. And if we were near a village, they would walk out and watch us move the Jeep. Mm-hmm. And I remember they must have been winching or clearing trail, because I was sitting in the Jeep and writing in my journal or something. And there's 2 or 3 little kids that came up to the door of the Jeep, and they were standing out there. And I was kind of trying to talk with them the best I could. And this one little girl, she kept reaching over and touching my leg. And she kept wiping, because I had shorts on, kept wiping my leg right by my knee. And then she'd look down at her leg and she'd wipe her leg by her knee. And I realized she was just interested in the different color of our skin. She was just fascinated that my color didn't wear off and her color didn't wear off. We were just, that would just happen to be what color we were. And she was just fascinated by that. And it just, there's just moments like that make you really appreciate these kids and their humanity that they have and their love for life. These little kids, I couldn't believe it. Kids in this country don't have a clue what real life is about. I'm sorry. Yeah, you get kids out there, and of course there's a lot of kids, and you've got 5 and 6-year-olds that are looking after their younger siblings. You got 5 and 6-year-olds with a machete over their shoulder, getting a dugout, going down river looking for an iguana or something to kill. No life jackets. Mom and dad are nowhere to be found. They're out hunting, and she's out doing something else in the garden or whatever. Mm-hmm. They're playing around the river. They're jumping in. They're having a great time. And they've got their responsibilities that, they've got to watch their younger siblings and take care of them. And they're barely old enough to do it in our society, enough to do it by themselves,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's amazing how quickly kids in other countries have to grow up. They don't have a choice.
You look or read, you think about the Wild West here in this country. 11-year-olds back then, or younger, were working the farm and going out hunting and going out fishing and providing for the family. Mm-hmm. Now we can't get the 18-year-olds to do that. So, it's like...
That's the truth, man. It's completely different, and it's completely different generations, completely different society, and this, I think that in our country, when you have more I don't know, maybe it makes you a
You
little less
expect more.
self-reliant. You expect
Yes,
more,
and
but
you expect more. Yeah.
yeah, but you're not
Yeah.
as maybe not as self-reliant
Yeah.
because
When everything's easy, why worry? It's all there. I
Right.
can get, it's, if this gas station doesn't have gas, the next gas station will. We've been in Africa where we've been in a town where there has been half a dozen gas stations and none of them had any gas. So yeah, it's an eye opener to travel, and it's an education. And I can't stress that enough for people to, it doesn't matter whether it's out the front door, around the block, across the street, to the next state over, to another country, halfway around the world. Get out there, see what's there, experience it, because it's all, well, I can't say it's all good. Right now there's some pretty scary places in the world. I gotta say that.
Yes.
And I just feel that it's a small group of people overall that give people a bad name. On a whole,
100%.
On a whole, most people are without a doubt there for you, giving you the shirt off their back, giving you whatever they have, they're willing to share with you. You've got 10 times more than they do, and they're still willing to share with you. We've camped in a farmer's field. We asked permission, and yeah, we can camp in your field. This was in Ecuador, I think. And the next morning, he shows up with a big bag of fresh green beans he just picked for us. This is his livelihood, is selling these green beans at market, and yet he's picked a bag and he's giving them to us.
Yeah.
So it's just that type of feeling that you get when you get to meet these people and experience these things.
Yeah, and I think that we've had other international overlanders on the show, and I hear the same message over and over again. The majority of people in other countries and even in our country are good people,
Yeah.
and they would be willing to help you and give you the shirt off their back and everything else. And, if you listen to the news or have these preconceived ideas about different countries, you're probably never going to go because you live in fear so much that a lot of times it's unfounded.
Yeah, I think we were kind of fortunate in a way in that we didn't have the internet. We didn't have instant access to the world. So we never knew exactly what we were walking into when we walked into it. It was one of those things that, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's, we never really had any major issues. I mean, we've had issues at borders in a few places, but nothing major. I mean, nowadays you look at the news or you read your what do you call it, the travel advisories that the U.S. government puts out, and I mean, it would make you want to just lock your doors and forget about it. Which that's sad. That's not good. I've got a good friend who is currently leaving a week from. Well, she leaves Monday, the 16th, for Nepal. She has a 12-hour plus, about 12-hour layover in Doha, Qatar. And she's really worried about that right now. So we've been talking about it and discussing it, and whether she stays in the airport for the full time, which she can do, or she has an option to take a tour of the city for that during that 12-hour period. And I said, I can't say one way or the other what I would say you should do. I can, I don't know that I would feel restricted.
Right.
I would probably still do it. I would probably do a little more research. I would definitely, if I'm leaving the airport, make sure I'm not wearing REI, Columbia, high-tech sporting outfits. I would wear something nondescript, long pants, long sleeves, scarf on my head, no backpack. Just try to blend in as much as possible so that you're not sticking out like a sore thumb, which is what you should do in half these countries anyway, so that you're not drawing attention to yourself. This is, something that, people should be aware of when they are visiting a lot of these places, is be aware of what the local customs are, and respect. And, they may not be what you would want to do, but that's their custom. You're in their country. Therefore, you should respect what their customs are. And, be aware of your surroundings at all times, which I mean, maybe to this day, when I'm walking the dog for some reason, I'm in my own neighborhood. I am still aware of my surroundings, who's where, what do I hear?
Absolutely.
It's just something that, my dad being born into a military family, Marine Corps family, and then he was with the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he did some pretty spooky stuff. And he instilled in us a way of, making sure you're always constantly aware of who's where and where they're at and where you're at. And if you're in a place that doesn't look right, where do you get out? Find an exit real quick. Know where they are.
Situational awareness.
Yes.
100%. So after we talked about how safe and friendly everybody is, why don't you tell everybody the story about when you got kidnapped and held against your will?
That was on an entirely different expedition.
I'm going to eat my chocolate. You're stressing me out.
Yeah, we figured we hadn't had enough of the Darien Gap. And in 1994, we started planning to go back to the Darien Gap with a two-wheel drive American-made Rokon motorcycle. It had never been crossed all on land by motorcycle. Had been gone by, motorcycles again, have gone through there. That's it.
That's so cute.
And we decided that we wanted to take an American-made motorcycle through there, and two-wheel drive, without a doubt, that motorcycle is without a doubt made for that terrain. It's not made for speed, but it's made for slow, steady climbing, and that thing will go. Doesn't have a clutch to burn out like a normal motorcycle would have, so it just was perfect. Anyway, we were doing fairly well. We were coming up to the village of Pukeru, where Loren had spent those 9 months living near the village on the Jeep expedition. We had men working for us from that village, 2 men. Cookie was with us and Stanislaw. And we knew what the procedure was when dealing with Kuna Indians. You don't just go into their village. You park outside, you walk in, you ask permission to enter. So we did all that. Well, I didn't. I stayed with the Rokon. Loren and Cookie and Stanislaw walked into the village, spoke to the head man and said, can we enter and have a place to camp for the night? And we were granted permission. We were showed a place to camp near the river. And then we were going to need men from the village to work for us the next day to get us to Paya, which is another Kuna village about 6 miles, 11 miles. I can't remember. Anyway, about a day's drive for the motorcycle away. And I stayed with the motorcycle at the camp, and Loren went to the meeting hut, because in order to work Kuna Indians, you have to go to the meeting hut. You have to explain what you're doing. You have, even though they know, you have to negotiate a price, and then they will kind of tell you who you will have working for you. You can't just walk up to, half a dozen Kunas and say, hey, you look like you're a really strong guy. We need some, good manpower. Can you work for us? No, you can't do it that way. They're not free agents. Just a minute. Shay, no. And I stayed with motorcycle. Loren was at the village. It wasn't quite dark yet. And all of a sudden, these 4 or 5 Kuna men, young men, came running into camp and started getting the motorcycle. And I said, no, you can't have the motorcycle. And I sat on it. I said, Loren's the only one that can move the motorcycle. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And I was arguing with them, saying, no, you cannot move the motorcycle. And about then, I could hear Loren's voice coming up the trail. He says, it's okay. They want to move the motorcycle to the meeting hut. I said, well, if they move the motorcycle to the meeting hut, we all go. The camp, me, you, everything. We're not leaving anything behind. So we all packed up everything, moved everything into the meeting hut. And we sat there discussing this, that, and the other thing. I'm not too sure what was going on. Finally, they got down to brass tacks. They wanted to charge us to go through the village. And we said, well, that's not really right. We asked if we could come into the village. You don't invite some, you don't ask permission and get granted permission and then say, oh, by the way, it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
And we realized that was falling on deaf ears. That wasn't going anywhere. So we said, how much? And again, my Spanish isn't that good. I thought they said $50. So I said, okay, will you take a traveler's check? Because we let it be known that we don't carry a great deal of cash.
Right.
And they said, yeah. So I said, okay, fine. So I got the traveler's check out and I went up to the table and I was getting ready to write the check or sign the check. And all of a sudden, the one guy says, no, 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 $500. And I grabbed the check back. And I went back and I told Loren, I said, they want $500. Well, Loren turned around to the two Choco Indians we had with us that were working for us, Angel and Jose. And he said to them, you've got to get to your village, which was 6 miles in the opposite direction through the jungle after dark, and then get word to Paya, which is 12 miles through in the opposite direction again, that we're being held against our will. And of course, the Kunas are having a fit over this because they're saying, you can't talk to them. You can't talk to them. And Loren says, damn right, I can talk to them. I pay them. They work for me. I can talk to them. I can talk to anyone I want to. And I was frightened for those two men leaving after dark. I really was. Because the two tribes don't get along anyway. And that was just like icing on the cake. I thought, oh my God, they're going to be ambushed or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, then they realized we were refusing to pay the $500. The next thing that happens is there comes a chain out and they chain the motorcycle to a post in the village. And we said, well, we'll go back. They said, no, you can't go back. You've got to pay the $500. We said, you don't invite someone in and then demand money. And then if they want to leave, still demand money. That's just not in our mind the way things work. Absolutely not. It's going to cost you $500 to go whichever way you want to go. So that kind of put an end to the night. We slept right there with the motorcycle. And the next day, and we did ask, was Paya going to charge us money as well? They said, oh, yes, Paya's going to charge you money as well, $500. And we said, okay. And yeah. So the next day, about 3:00 in the afternoon, the Guardia show up, the National Guard from Paya. The two Choco had gotten message to them, and they showed up. And the Kunas have they're an autonomous nation there, so they're governed, but not so much by Panama. They have a lot of freedom to do what they want. So the Guardia couldn't do too much. And I know that he said to me before he left, we all discussed it again there at the village, and it was decided upon that we would pay when we got back to Panama because we didn't have the money. We would send the money out when we sent the money out that we used to pay the men. Because that's how we agreed. Anyone that worked for us there also agreed not to get paid till we returned to Panama. And then Loren was going to come back out to Pukeru and pay everybody off. They said, okay, fine. We will accept that. And we were going to be there that night, and the Guardia, he was a lieutenant. That's all I can remember. He asked me, he said, do you feel safe? I said, no, I don't. I don't trust these people anymore. I mean, I had trust in these people for a long time, and I don't trust them at all. And I don't know what I don't speak enough Spanish, especially when it's done fast. He turned around and spoke to the whole room, and basically I think it boiled down to nothing better happened to these people. And the next day we left, went through Paya. They didn't seem to know anything about it or could care less about it. They had no idea. So we had no problems. Anyway, long story short, yeah, we were basically held against our will for $500 for 24 hours or a little over. And when it all came down to brass tacks, Loren wasn't going to pay them the $500. He was going to pay them $25. And if they wanted more than that, they were going to have, and he had this written out in a letter in Spanish when we got back to Panama, and he was going to take it out when he went to pay everybody off. And if they wanted more than the $25, then they would have to take us to a court in Panama, and we would do it that way. Well, when he was headed upriver to Pukeru, there's a piragua, a dugout coming downriver, had Cookie in it. He was just headed to Panama. So Cookie and he got together, and Cookie had a note from the people of Pukeru that said, oh, we thought about it. You don't owe us anything.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But it's a new law. So it's a new law. So anybody coming through after you will have to pay this. I said, okay, that's good to know now.
All right.
Wow. And so how long did you guys still keep in touch with Cookie for a long time, or,
I've tried to keep in touch with him as best I can. There's been over the past few years friends that have gone down there for one reason or another. One was in 2016 and one was in about 2019. Yeah, just before COVID. Just before COVID. And I have a photo on both occasions with that person and Cookie. They've sent back to me. I would love to get in touch with him. I have a book I want to send him. I would love to interview him with somebody that speaks Spanish. It's just right now, and I have no qualms about going down there right now at this time with this going on, because first off, the problems in the Darien are in a different area than where we would be going. I know there's a lot of problems, but it's all in a different area than where I would be going. So I'm actually planting a seed in my brain that next dry season, December, January, February, if I can find somebody and get enough financing one way or the other saved up, I wouldn't mind going back down there just for, putting those little bits of information in the book that I want to get written, get Cookie's perspective on what all this was.
Mm-hmm. And to find out what he said that one day.
Yeah.
If he remembers.
That's really bothering me now.
He was just good. Just another little side story if you got time. Same trip with the motorcycle further on in Colombia. It was our first wedding anniversary. And Loren's on the motorcycle and we're crossing into this village that we'd been in before with the Jeep. And he's crossing over this flattened log over a creek. The creek's really low, dry season, not much water. And there's some women down there washing clothes. And I'm behind him. And as I look over and look down in the river, here's this woman in a black, what do you call it? A t-shirt, but the sleeves are cut out, really out. She has a black sports bar on, camo pants, some type of belt with at least one pistol on it, and a couple of magazines, and an automatic weapon a knife and an automatic weapon across her chest. And I'm thinking, oh, that doesn't belong in this picture. And,
G.I. Jane?
Yeah. Laundry day.
Yeah. And she's just standing there. All the women are washing clothes. She's just standing there watching everybody. And I thought, no, this doesn't look good. So we get into this village, and two more of these similarly dressed people confront us, along with this woman. They want to know what we're doing, how we're doing it, why are we doing it, the whole bit. And I have a letter written in Spanish by the Colombian embassy, and I show it to him, and Cookie's with us. And Cookie, again, knows us, knows what we're doing, knows that these are crazy gringos. And he starts talking. Again, no clue what he says, but these people listen to him, and they fold up the letter, and they hand it back to me. And they said, okay. That was it. So we spent that night in the village. The next morning, we were out of there as fast as our little butts would go. And we did come. I had the not pleasurable. Well, it was okay. It was not bad. I ran into 4 or 5 more Colombian FARC guerrillas, and that's what these were. Days later, Loren was on the motorcycle on the. We're following down a river. He was up on the bank. Probably 10, 15 yards from the river itself, but you could hear him and hear the guides talking and stuff. And I'm sitting in the boat with Cookie with all the supplies, and I've got Trimble GPS, first handheld GPS that was available to civilians that Trimble sent us. And I'm trying to get a reading because I'm in the river, so at least I've got a fairly reasonable view of the sky. And I hear a motorboat coming upriver, and I thought, that's not good. So I dropped the Trimble down below the gunwales of the boat. Mm-hmm. And it's all fairly good, clean-cut young men. I thought, well, that doesn't look right either. So I slipped the whole thing in my backpack. And just as this boat passes us, the motor cuts. And of course, it drifts back down. And the lead guy, they're all wearing ponchos. It had been raining. And the lead guy starts talking to me. Want to know what we're doing? What are we gonna? Went through the whole thing again. And Cookie chimes in, tells him everything. So says something. And this guy kind of looks at me, smiles. He says, okay, have a good day. And he flips back his poncho. And again, he's got a big automatic weapon across his chest. And then he does this across his mouth, wanting me to be quiet. Hell, I ain't telling anybody. I mean, when we got out in Colombia, when we got to the end of the Darien Gap in Colombia to Rio Sucio, the village of Rio Sucio, the Colombian police met us. And the first thing they wanted to know is, did we have trouble in the mountains? And actually, we didn't. I said, no, we had more trouble with the Kunas in Panama than we did with the FARC guerrillas. I mean, we weren't telling him that, but the FARC guerrillas were very polite. It was the Kunas that were the big stickler on our sides. But I mean, that's not to say that the FARC have a bad, they've got a bad reputation for a reason. And I mean, we personally know of some people that were killed by them. So I mean, they're not as active down there now as they used to be. This is what's going on down the area now is an entirely different scenario with the human smuggling that's coming across, because Panama tends to turn a blind eye to it because they know they're just going through the country. That's all they're doing. They're not staying in Panama. So It's like, just keep right on going. And, whatever drugs they're bringing in, it isn't the cocaine that used to be coming through there or the marijuana. This is, other stuff that's coming up. So there is problems, but it's not being caused by the Colombian FARC guerrillas anymore.
Wow. All right. So the last thing I definitely wanted to touch on is on your website, you have something called the Final Mile.
Yes.
Why don't you explain to us what the Final Mile is?
The Final Mile, when we were in Israel in 1988, we could not drive to Jordan. They were technically at war. We couldn't drive from Jordan to Israel. There was just no way you could cross that border. And at that time, Lebanon was definitely out for Americans. This was, like I said, 88. I don't remember when the barracks bombing was in Beirut, but it was only a couple of years before that, I think. Mm-hmm. Americans were not really welcome in Lebanon. And staying on land was our goal. Well, in order to get from Israel north, you had to go through Lebanon or Jordan. And we couldn't get into Jordan at all. So we ended up having to go back into Egypt and go by ferry boat to Aqaba, Jordan. And we continued on all the way to Gamvik, Norway, ending the trip July 4th, 1989. But there remained what we called the final mile between Israel and Jordan, that gap caused by human nature instead of Mother Nature. And we got busy with life and working and saving money and other travels. And it was always just eating at Loren that the final mile was never completed. So he did not take one American-made vehicle around the world on a north-south course, all on land. It would be all on land but a mile or whatever it turned out to be. So that always set bad. His nephew, Lawrence, spearheaded an endeavor, had the Jeep refurbished, re-outfitted to a degree, cleaned up, nothing really major done to her. And the man we had worked for 27 years could see Lauren's health was deteriorating. And he said, you must make this trip sooner rather than later. If you wait we weren't going to go till late 2018, which would have been 30 years from when we had been there. He says, no, you have to go sooner. I will pay for your trip, Lauren's trip, and the round trip for the Sandship Discovery to Israel and back. That was 99.9% of the budget right there, transportation. Everything else, food, was nothing. So we went in May of 2018, and we crossed from Israel, from a road we were on in Israel, to a road we were on in Jordan, made a U-turn and came right back into Israel again. And we were successful in doing this because of, probably a half a dozen, 8, maybe even as many as 10 men that we met there in Israel, every one of them a Jeeper at heart, if not physically driving a Jeep. And they're the ones that actually made this possible for us to do. And with what's going on there right now, I am in touch with most of them to make sure that they're okay. Yeah. I'm worried sick about them because they all live in Ashdod, Rehovot, Ashkelon. These are all places that are within missile, well, everything's in missile distance, but they are definitely in missile from Gaza. So yeah, I'm praying deeply for their safety right now. Them and their families, they've got young kids, the whole bit.
Yeah, it's
so the final mile. was completed on May 3rd, 2018. So when people ask how long did the trip take, well, that's really kind of a very complicated question. The the Sandship Discovery left Prudhoe Bay, Alaska on June 15th, 1984. And she completed 4 wheels on the ground around the world, all on land, except for the South Atlantic, on May 3rd, 2018.
That's amazing.
Sometimes dedication and determination get you where you want to be.
Absolutely. So is there, you mentioned you wouldn't mind going back down to Panama and places. Is there a lot of traveling in your future still? Is Patty done traveling yet? Or are you still
No,
got more
no,
places
I'm
you
not.
want to see?
My coffin's going to have wheels. No, I got to keep moving. I'm hoping. I had a great time this year. I took the Sandship Discovery around to 2 Overland Expos, 2 Jeep Fests, and the Overland Show in Idaho Falls, the Teton Overland Show. So I had a great response. I met lots of good people, got some good information, getting her story out there. It's one of those things that people have heard maybe a little bit about, or they've heard something about, and they're confusing it with somebody else's trip down there. And I'm trying to set the story straight as to what was what and who was who. And I will get a book out eventually. I don't know exactly when. That's part of my goal this winter. I'm going to lock myself in the house here in Idaho and not go outside and work on this. But I do for next year, I'm looking forward to doing this again, taking the Sandship Discovery around to overland shows, rallies, expos, Jeep Fests, basically whoever will have me. And get her story out there and continue to meet people, talk people, hopefully inspire people to get out there and do the same thing. Let them know that, it's a carpenter and a secretary. I mean, you don't need big bucks. You just need it has to start here. You get it up here, you're going to get it here. That's all you need. Then you'll make everything else work. So yeah, you don't have to have every little doodad that they've ever made for an overland vehicle. All you have to do is have the desire. And if you've got the desire, right, you've got it lit right there. I mean, it's nice. Oh shoot, I would love to have a real ice box or, whatever. But yeah, my ice chest works just fine. But in this part of the world, I'm not too concerned. So yeah, works for me. Don't have a solar panel. Don't need a solar panel. But I will make sure that her story is out there. This was something Loren and I had talked about doing. But when he got sick and this illness took him, I'm going to cry now. I realized that I had to get out there and get his story told. I know that I'm a part of that story, but he was the driving force behind this. I may have organized things and knew where things were and could pack the Jeep better than anybody else, but it was his story. It was his goal. I was fortunate to be a part of it. And that means the world to me. I always say he gave me my voice. I was a wallflower. No one knew I was in the room. And that's changed in this past year or so. And I thank him for it so much. Now that I've ruined it. Sorry, guys.
You never ruined it.
It's truly a love story, though. I mean,
it is. It was. Or it is. I am in love with that man. He was a remarkable human being. He would do anything for anybody. Some people would often call him obsessed, which is something he always took offense to. In his mind, if you were obsessed, you would do anything to reach your goal, including hurt people. And that was never, ever in his makeup. Hurting anybody, stepping on someone else's toes to reach his destination was not what he would do. He would find a way around you if you were an obstacle, but he wouldn't hurt you to do it. So obsessed was never a good description for him. Determination was. Single-minded
driven.
sometimes.
Driven.
Yeah.
Drive. That's what he wanted.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I'm just in awe of your love story and your travels, and
phenomenal.
You guys, gosh, it's like you've lived 10 lifetimes, and all of the adventures and things you got to do. And
yeah. I feel fortunate. I feel blessed. And meeting people this past summer has been, again, the highest point. I mean, even if nothing ever comes of the Sandship Discovery or whatever, I don't know. I mean, I'm still looking for a home for her. I've got some leads. I've got some feelers out there. I'm hoping that here in the near future, like I said, I still want to take her around next summer, but maybe I'm getting up there in age. I don't know that I'm up to too many more cross-country trips. So I'm hoping that within a year's time or so that I'll have found a good home for her where she can, good retirement home where her story will be told and she'll be put on display.
So it's funny.
Oh no, she froze again. Somebody slap her.
She Bugs Bunnied on us.
Oh dear.
Oh, sort of. Okay.
I went away. So when is your birthday? I missed that part, of course.
A couple weeks ago.
It was what, last week? I don't know. What's today? It was just last Saturday.
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
I'm glad you made it with Tara's driving. So,
Anytime. I'll be a passenger anytime.
I'm just kidding. Tara's an amazing driver, and we had a really good time.
Yeah.
Patty and Tara and I took a little off-road trip and explored and had a really good time in Idaho. And
she's got a good vehicle and she knows how to use it. So yeah.
She sure does. The walking part we had issues with because we were on such a
exactly.
and none of us could walk, but the driving was fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, why don't you go ahead real quick and tell everybody how they can find you on social media and all of your different handles and stuff.
Okay. My website is www.outbackofbeyond.com. It's an archaic website. It's not mobile friendly. It is in the process of being updated and changed considerably. I built it 25 years ago on an archaic platform, and that's now no longer available. So it's being updated by a friend, and hopefully will be up and running in its new modern version here within another month. My social or on Instagram, it's Sandship Discovery. And I do a little bit there. I'm still learning it. It's one of those things that's definite learning curve there. So
understood.
That's awesome.
Same.
Well, thank you, Patty, so much for being on the show. I love you to death, and I love your stories, and I could sit there and listen to you for hours. And I really appreciate you being on the show.
You have, I think.
I think I have. So
thank you, Misty.
Thank you guys for watching. Definitely check out Outback of Beyond. Patty, I know she's looking for someone to help her write her story. And, if you know of anybody, please connect us with them and we will direct them to her. And make sure that you check out the expos coming up next year. I'm sure she'll be at quite a few of them. You'll be able to check out the Jeep and hear her story in person and meet her in person. And it's truly a treat. So everybody have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.